It's working. Right. We are live on Facebook. And now we'll mute everybody. Okay. Oops, wrong camera. I got to turn on the other camera. Hold on 1 second. We will go to the other camera. There we go. There's the real me. In the forest. This is better than Hawaii, where I live. It's beautiful. You see the trees and devotees and everything. This is Vaikuntha. All right. Anyway, so, oops. Integrated. Select the camera. Hold on a second. Yeah, UVC. Okay, so we'll start now, and we'll start chanting Jai Radha Madhava. And we're going to continue with our study of nectar devotion. Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunya Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Giri Varadhati Gopi Jana Malabha Giri Varadhati Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Jaya Ranhuman Uva Kunya Bihari Jaya Ranhuman Uva Kunya Bihari Gopi Jana Malabha Giri Varadhati Gopi Jana Malabha Giri Varadhati Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravatikacharya also tell us that Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Chalananda Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Vilas Thakur Ki Jai, Ren Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha, Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna, Gopi Gopinath, Shyam Kund Radhakunda, Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam ki jai, Mathuram ki jai, Jagannathaswami ki jai, Yamunamai ki jai, Srimati Tulasi Devi ki jai, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Tejatarne. So Om Gana Tivinanda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So, then, as we usually do when we start the Nectar of Devotion, we read this particular verse from Srinivas Acharya's prayers to the six Goswamis. So, Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipano Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Itakarane Tribhuvane Manyosharanya Karo Radha Krishna Vidaravinda Vajananandena Mataliko Bande Rupa Sanatano Raghuyago Shri Jiva Gopala Ko. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the three worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. So, before continuing with the Nectar of Devotion, I just wanted to show you a little chart. Anyway, actually I wanted to show that chart. Let me see. Sometimes the computer doesn't always cooperate with me. Anyway. Oh, here, yeah, that's it. So, this is not a chart. This is the Brahmajyoti right here. But the chart is going to magically appear. And this chart has to do with the vicious cycle of karma, prarabdha, aparabdha, and all the nice stuff. And I'm going to talk about this. Just to reiterate what we talked about yesterday, the devotional service, pure devotional service, brings immediate relief from all distress, and distress comes from karma and sinful activities. Here we go. So first we got ignorance, which is called avidya. And from that ignorance of one's real identity. What is one's real identity? We are spirit soul, but even more than that, we are part and parcel of Krishna, and even more than that, we're eternal servants of Krishna. Jivera Sura Hoi Nitya Krishna Das. So we're ignorant. We're ignoring our true identity, which is covered up by Krishna's illusory energy because of our envy of Krishna. And then from ignorance, we get a bijam, the seed of sin. And after we get the seed, we do the papa. That doesn't mean our father. That means sinful act, papa. And after we get that, we got the aparabdha, which is the unmanifest reaction. This is actually how Rupa Goswami describes it. Aparabdha is the unmanifest reaction. And then we get the manifest reaction. And let's not even mention that anyway. And then, oh yeah, sorry. Aparabdha, parabdha, manifest reaction. And then we also get after that the kutam, which is the inclination to do sin. And after the kutam, you get the bijam again. It goes round and round you go. Where it stops, nobody knows. In other words, you're ignorant, forgetting your real identity. You're working on false pretenses that you're the body, that you're the enjoyer, you're the proprietor, like this. And then you get the bijam, the papam, the aparabdha, parabdha karma, the manifest reaction. This is actually what Rupa Goswami talks about, just to make it clear what we were talking about yesterday, because sometimes you need a chart to actually illustrate the philosophical point. Then you get the kutam, which is the inclination, and you get the kutam, which is part of the reaction. It's actually aparabdha because it's not manifest to your eyes, but it's in one sense it's also parabdha. Anyway, it's part of the combination of parabdha and aparabdha. You get the kutam, the sinful inclination, and then you do get the seed of some. Bijam is not exactly sinful reaction. It's the seed of desire to do some sinful thing. It's a sinful reaction, but it's the seed of doing something. And then the papam is the actual act. And then you get suffering. Suffering. Bijam, desire. So there's some examples of this from the Nectar of Devotion. You have a desire. Ignorance, bijam, papam, the same thing. Okay, I don't need to go through this whole thing. Okay, next we're going to talk about shubhada, happiness. No, we're not going to talk about it. We're talking about auspiciousness. Sorry. We're talking about auspiciousness. Sorry about that. Let's get rid of that one. Okay, we're going to talk about auspiciousness, and let's go on to the Nectar of Devotion. Share the screen on that. NOD, where can it be? Hold on a second, there we go. All auspicious. Krishna consciousness is all auspicious. That's the second one of the 6 principles. First one is immediate relief from all distress. Second one is Krishna consciousness is all auspicious. So Srila Rupa Goswami has given a definition of auspiciousness. He says that actual auspiciousness means welfare activities for all the people of the world. At the present moment, groups of people are engaged in welfare activities in terms of society, community, or nation. There's even an attempt in the form of the United Nations for world help activity. But due to the shortcomings of limited national activity, such a general mass welfare program for the whole world is not practically possible. The Krishna consciousness movement, however, is so nice that it can render the highest benefit to the entire human race. Everyone can be attracted by this movement, and everyone can feel the result. Therefore, Rupa Goswami and other learned scholars agree that a broad propaganda program for the Krishna consciousness movement of devotional service all over the world is the highest humanitarian welfare activity. Now, why is it the highest? Because it's a permanent welfare activity. Because let's say you relieve someone's distress through mundane welfare activity. That distress he is suffering is due to, does anyone know? Karma. You haven't gotten rid of the karma. And even if you could have gotten rid of the karma, which you can't get rid of the karma, you haven't gotten rid of the kuta and the bija, the seed of doing that thing again. Okay? So the reason we're suffering really is because of bad karma. And attachment, combined with attachment to this world, to this body. As Lord Buddha says, the famous Lord Buddha, he said the material world is suffering, but suffering is caused by attachment. Give up the attachment. You get rid of the suffering. So we're attached and we're getting these reactions. So if you really want to help people, you've got to help people Both ways, buddy. You got to help them become detached, and you got to help them get rid of that good old karma. So the first part that we talked about yesterday, we taught people how to get rid of the good old karma. And so to help people become detached, we have to help them become attached to Krishna. That's what the Bhagavad Gita teaches us. Raso varjam rasyopyasa parandrastani vartate. One can experience a higher taste and be fixed in consciousness. Vishaya vinivartante nihirashadayana. But if we don't have that higher taste, we're just pretending. We still have the attraction to the lower taste, even though temporarily we're just holding off on it. So the whole point is to have the higher taste that brings you detachment automatically. What is that verse? Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayati Asu Vairagyam Gyanam Chaya Hoitakam. That one who actually takes up Krishna consciousness, especially the process of hearing and chanting, then you get this higher taste, so you automatically get renunciation. Renunciation comes from concentration on something more pleasurable. So isn't that the best welfare activity? We're not going to change the nature of this material world. As Krishna also says in the Gita, Dukalayam Ashashvatam. He said it's a place, temporary place of misery. And he also says, you can go to the highest planet, which is Brahmaloka, Brahmabhuvanaloka, Avartino Arjuna. You can go to the lowest planet, and you'll still find these concomitant miseries. Birth, death, disease, old age, and some other things, the threefold miseries, miseries from living entities, miseries from the material energy in general, and miseries from your own body and your beloved mind. So, therefore, if we want to really help people, we have to help people get out of the attachment and out of the karma. Those are the two things that are causing the suffering. So, otherwise, you can temporarily blow on a boil or whatever. Like when you were young, you had cut yourself and you asked your mother to kiss your boil or kiss the cut that you had in your hand or whatever. How the Krishna conscious movement can attract the attention of the whole world, and how each and every man can feel pleasure in this Krishna consciousness is stated in the Padma Purana as follows. A person who is engaged in devotional service in full Krishna consciousness is to be understood to be doing the best service to the whole world and to be pleasing to everyone in the world. In addition to human society, he is pleasing even the trees and animals because they become attracted by such a movement. That's strange. Here's the explanation. A practical example of this was shown by Lord Chaitanya when he was traveling through the forests of Jharkhand in central India for spreading his Sankirtan movement. The tigers, the elephants, the deer, and all other wild animals joined him and were participating in their own ways by dancing and chanting Hare Krishna. Don't try that in the jungle or in the zoo. You cannot do that. You are not Lord Chaitanya. However, if you chant to animals or trees or plants or whatever like that, they will make spiritual advancement. I'm not saying they're going to dance for you. They may not. They probably will not dance for you. But they will hear the sound. The sound penetrates them. It's a practical fact that plants, for example, hear sound vibration. They've done many studies of playing different types of music for plants and seeing how they grow. In one study, they played rock music or punk music or rap music for the plants. And another study, in the same study, the contrasting aspect of the study, they played some nice Krishna, no, not Krishna conscious music. They played some classical music, some more closer to mode of goodness. And the plants gravitated towards the mode of goodness music. They grew much bigger. So, music, sound vibration affects everything. In the Bible, of course, it's mentioned in the beginning was the Word. Of course, sometimes they translate that as Logos, and God is the Logos. But anyway, that's a different understanding. But we say also in the beginning was the sound vibration. Because what did God say in the beginning? He said, let there be light. Of course, he was speaking in Sanskrit, or it was Lord Brahma doing the work for him. But there was sound vibration. And by sound vibration, all living entities can be benefited. And Haridas Thakur brings that out in his conversation with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when Lord Chaitanya asked, how can all the living entities, including the inanimate living entities, be benefited? Haridas Thakur said, by the loud chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. Furthermore, a person engaged in Krishna consciousness, acting in devotional service, can develop all good qualities that are generally found in the demigods. It is said by Shukadeva Goswami in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 18th chapter, verse 12, my dear king, persons who have unflinching faith in Krishna and are without any duplicity can develop all the good qualities of the demigods. On account of a devotee's high grade of Krishna consciousness, even the demigods like to live with him, and therefore it can be understood that the qualities of the demigods are developed within his body. And of course, that means qualities in the mode of goodness. Because when you chant, you actually cleanse the heart, and your impulses become more in the mode of goodness than in the other modes, and your thoughts gravitate towards the mode of goodness. On the other hand, a person who's not in Krishna consciousness has no good qualities. We've explained that before. We don't want to get too controversial. It basically means because things are not stable. Let's say if I'm not in Krishna consciousness, or I'm not spiritual, we're not even going to be sectarian in this particular discussion. Let's say I'm not spiritual, I'm not dedicated to God. Okay, so today I may be acting really nice and have a lot of good qualities, and tomorrow things could change. I wake up on the wrong side of the bed. So we find the description in the Gita, which we read some time ago, about how the modes of nature are continual flux in this world. Sometimes the mode of goodness is prominent, defeating ignorance and passion. Sometimes passion defeating ignorance and goodness. You get the idea. So if someone is in Krishna conscious, someone is Krishna conscious, or in Krishna consciousness, that person is stable. Even though the modes may try to affect him or her, that person can actually just say no and act in terms of the intelligence, doing the right thing. He may be highly educated from the academic point of view, but in the actual field of his activities, he can be seen to be baser than animals. How can we say that? How can someone with a PhD be baser than the animals? I'll tell you how. Because animals have 4 activities: eating, sleeping, mating, defending. And someone with a PhD, if he's not spiritually conscious, that's non-denominational, simply has those 4 activities. In a more cultured way, you can eat in a high-class restaurant and pay $1,000 for a meal, if you like. But it's still the same, in essence, as an animal, just like eating whatever the animal is eating. A pig, sorry about that, putting his nose into the slop. What's the difference? I remember when I was young, my father took us all to this really expensive restaurant. It was like a restaurant that revolved in the sky. I mean, it was on top of a building. It wasn't like a satellite or something like that. But it was like, it was in New York, and the old World's Fair in New York. And we had, each of us had like 3 waiters or waitresses. And it was super expensive. And we had like 4 forks, 3 spoons, 3 knives. Everything was so sophisticated. But the process was eating. So it was the same thing. So if someone is just and we have nothing against eating, nothing against sleeping, nothing against sex life, nothing against these things. But if that's your whole life, and you have an education, then it's worse than being an animal. Why? Because you have the ability to be more, and you're not utilizing that faculty. Even though a person is highly educated academically, if he cannot go beyond the sphere of mental activities, then he's sure to perform only material activities and remain impure. There are so many persons in the modern world who have been highly educated in the materialistic universities, and it is seen they cannot take up the movement of Krishna consciousness and develop the high qualities of the demigods. For example, a Krishna conscious boy, even if he is not very well educated by the university standard, can immediately give up all illicit sex, life, gambling, meat eating, intoxication, whereas those who are not Krishna conscious, although very highly educated, are often drunkards, meat eaters, sex mongers, and gamblers. And I experienced that with my professors in the university, because after the semester was over and we had the party, and the professor was there, and the professor was just as degraded as the students were. I think even a little more degraded, because he was being degraded with people half his age or a quarter of his age. It was ridiculous. These are practical proofs of how a Krishna conscious person becomes highly developed in good qualities, whereas a person who's not Krishna conscious cannot do so. We experience that even a young boy in Krishna consciousness is unattached to cinemas. And Prabhupada here is talking about materialistic, cinema, of course, means videos. In those days, they didn't have videos or computers. Nightclubs, naked dance shows, restaurants, and that's you're talking about meat restaurants, liquor shops, etc. He becomes completely freed. He saves his valuable time from being extravagantly spent in the way of smoking, drinking, attending the theater, and dancing. If something's Krishna conscious, we love that theater, or if it has some redeeming social message, that's fine. But we're talking about just like wasting one's time. And of course, smoking is dangerous to your health if you haven't discovered that yet. Drinking is also dangerous to your health and mental health. And dancing for Krishna is fine. So you can do all these things for Krishna. You can attend the theater for Krishna. You can drink prasadam, drink. You can have a smoking kirtan. Smoking kirtan means really enthusiastic kirtan, not that you smoke during the kirtan. If you really like smoke, then you light up some incense sticks. That's up to you. So one who is not Krishna conscious usually cannot sit silently even for half an hour. The yoga system teaches that if you become silent, you will realize that you are God. This system may be all right for materialistic persons, but how long will they be able to keep themselves silent? Artificially, they may sit down for so-called meditation, but immediately after their yogic performance, they will engage themselves again in such activities as illicit sex, life, gambling, meat eating, and many other nonsensical things. But a Krishna-conscious person gradually elevates himself without endeavoring for this so-called silent meditation. It's kind of boring, silent meditation. I tried it before I came to Krishna consciousness. I used to meditate on the sound of one hand clapping, or I would meditate on a candle. After that, after a few attempts, then I just started chanting Om, which is much more pleasurable. Simply because he's engaged in Krishna consciousness, he automatically gives up all this nonsense and develops a high character. Because he's having a good time. It's not that he has to struggle to give these things up. I mean, what is the struggle? You dance for Krishna instead of going to the naked dance club. You dance for Krishna. You eat prasadam for Krishna. You do all these things that you can engage these propensities. You get intoxicated by hearing about Krishna and chanting Krishna's names. It's really intoxicating. I mean, Prabhupada, in the early days, would sometimes advertise the chanting of Hare Krishna in the way that he would say, "Stay high forever." So, one develops the highest character by becoming a pure devotee of Krishna. The conclusion is that no one can truly have any good qualities if he is lacking in Krishna consciousness. He can exhibit some temporarily, yes, but they come and go, certainly. And we're not just talking in a sectarian way. We're talking about any type of God consciousness or spiritual consciousness. So Krishna consciousness can be applied in a generic way too. So the next one is happiness in Krishna consciousness. Joy, that's what I wanted. Srila Rupa Goswami has analyzed the different sources of happiness. He has divided happiness into three categories. One, happiness derived from material enjoyment. Remember what I said about that, or what Krishna said about that? It's like nectar in the beginning. A young boy and young girl meet. Ooh. When the moon hits your eye, like a big pizza pie, it's called amore. Anyway, so they meet. I won't explain. I won't translate that one for you. They meet, and oh, happy, happy, happy. Bewildered, bewildered. And after a while, that rubs off. Actually, there was a song in the 1960s. Does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight? Some of you may remember that. Perhaps none of you are old enough to remember that. So that's the first type of happiness. Material enjoyment, getting a new car, getting a new phone. Just like someone contacted me today. They said, get yourself a new phone. And this will make you happy, and they will pay for it. That person offered to pay for it. And I thought, oh, that person is so compassionate and loving. So I looked, and they're all sold out. So what was happiness in the beginning, nectar in the beginning, became disappointment at the end. All right, that's the first type of happiness. Second is happiness derived from identifying oneself with the Supreme Brahman. So that sort of happiness is like a relief type of happiness. You're suffering so much, and it's a little relief. Like the example Lord Chaitanya gave about the dunking stool. You put someone under the water until they're practically dead, because they have no air to breathe, obviously, and you bring them up in the stool. And they go, oh, isn't it nectar to breathe? It's so nice to breathe. Just like today, I went swimming, so the swimming pool was really cold. So I got in the water and suffered. And then as soon as I got out, I got in the sun. I said, oh, this is nectar. So that's the same thing as identifying yourself with the Brahman, Supreme Brahman, not Krishna we're talking about here, but understanding you're not the body. Oh, what a relief I'm not the body. And that is relief. That is a little happiness. It's a relief from the disappearance of distress. And the third type of happiness is a positive happiness derived from Krishna consciousness. It's not dependent upon suffering. It's not dependent on duality. It's like one thing happened when I joined the Krishna conscious movement. My mother said to me, why did you join the Krishna conscious movement? I said, I want to be happy all the time. And she said, that's nonsense. That's not natural. You got to take the good with the bad. You got to take the suffering with the joy. And we know in the material world that that's true. Remember the principle we talked about in this introduction to Nectar Devotion? Bhoga Tyaga. It means if you want to have enjoyment, you've got to be a little renounced first. If you want to enjoy eating, you got to stop eating for some time. Otherwise, eating becomes miserable. Like that. So you've got to have some break, even from the so-called enjoyment. So, but Krishna conscious happiness is positive. You can have it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 366 on leap year, and you never get tired of it. So it's a positive happiness, not like the happiness from material enjoyment. So in the Tantra Shastra, now the word Tantra doesn't necessarily mean something bad. People think, oh, he does Tantra, black magic, voodoo. Ooh, it doesn't mean that. The word Tantra means to connect. And Shastra means, some book or instruction. In the Tantra Shastra, which is a book is written down now, Lord Shiva speaks to his wife, Sati, in this way. My dear wife, a person who has surrendered himself at the lotus feet of Govinda and who has thus developed pure Krishna consciousness can be very easily awarded all the perfections desired by the impersonalists, and beyond this, he can enjoy the happiness achieved by the pure devotees. Bhaja Bhaja Bhai, Chaitanya Nidai, Sudrada. So you can always be happy. Kevalananda Kanda. Kevala means only happiness. Happiness derived from pure devotional service is the height. You never get depressed because it is eternal. The happiness derived, you may have some spiritual depression, which is ecstasy. In other words, you may feel so much unhappiness seeing people suffer when you're actually happy. But that's a type of happiness, the happiness derived from compassion. So the happiness derived from material perfection or understanding oneself to be Brahman is inferior because it is temporary. There is no preventing one's falling down from material happiness, and there is even every chance of falling down from the spiritual happiness derived out of identifying oneself with the impersonal Brahman. And that's stated in the Bhagavatam. Krishna param padam patajat yasmad angrayaha. That after some time, people who are floating in the Brahman, or the souls that are floating in the Brahman, they fall down because there's no engagement, no activities. It has been seen that even great Mayavadi impersonalist sannyasis, very highly educated, almost realized souls, sometimes take to political activities or to social welfare activities. The reason is that they actually do not derive any ultimate transcendental happiness in the impersonal understanding, and therefore must come down to the material platform to take to such mundane affairs. There are many instances, especially in India, where these Mayavadi sannyasis, Mayavadi means one who thinks, I'm God, you're God, we're all God, we can merge into the absolute, descend to the material platform again. But a person who is fully in Krishna consciousness will never return to any sort of material platform. However alluring and attracting they may be, he always knows that no material welfare activities can compare to the spiritual activity of Krishna consciousness. So, the mystic perfections achieved by actually successful yogis are 8 in number. This is quite interesting. Animosity refers to the power by which one can become so small that he can enter into a stone. Modern scientific improvements also enable us to enter into stone because they provide for excavating so many subways penetrating the hills, etc. So animosity, the mystic perfection of trying to enter into stone, has also been achieved by material science. Similarly, all of the yoga siddhis or perfections are material arts. For example, in one yoga siddhi, there is a development of the power to become so light that one can float in the air or in water. That is also being performed by modern scientists. They are flying in the air, they're floating on the surface of the water, and they are traveling under the water. After comparing all these mystic yogic siddhis to materialistic perfections, we find that the materialistic scientists try for the same perfections. So actually, there's no difference between mystic perfection and materialistic perfection. Wow. Just like now, for example, one of the mystic siddhis is that you can take a bath or go into one place, like one river, come up in another river. And the scientists now are looking to figure out a way to teleport matter using quantum theory. I'm not going to get into the details, and I'm not going to tell you how to do it. How you can teleport matter from one part of the universe to another. Or, as they say in one famous science fiction TV show, beam me up or beam me down. So the yogis could do those things. A German scholar once said that the so-called yoga perfections had already been achieved by the modern scientists, and so he was not concerned with them. He intelligently went to India. This is Prabhupada's godbrother. Prabhupada is talking about. To learn how he can understand his eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord by means of bhakti yoga devotional service. Of course, in the categories of mystic perfection, there are certain processes which the materialistic scientists have not yet been able to develop. For instance, a mystic yogi can enter into the sun planet simply by using the rays of the sunshine. This perfection is called lakima. It means becoming very light. Similarly, a yogi can touch the moon with his finger. Though modern astronauts go to the moon with the help of spaceships, they undergo many difficulties, whereas a person with mystic perfection can extend his hand and touch the moon with his finger. This siddhi is called prapti siddhi, or acquisition. With this prapti siddhi, not only can the perfect mystic yogi touch the moon planet, but he can extend his hand anywhere and take whatever he likes. He may be sitting thousands of miles away from a certain place, and if he likes, he can take fruit from a garden there. This is called prapti siddhi. And that would be an ideal yogic siddhi for a bank robber to have. Never get caught. You can just reach out and make a withdrawal. The modern scientists have manufactured nuclear weapons which they can destroy, with which they can destroy an insignificant part of this planet, but by the yoga city known as Ishita, one can create and destroy an entire planet at will. Another perfection is called Vashita, and by this perfection, one can bring anyone under his control. This is a kind of hypnotism which is almost irresistible. Sometimes it is found that a yogi who may have attained a little perfection in this Vashita mystic power comes out among the people and speaks all sorts of nonsense, controls their minds, exploits them, and takes their money and then goes away. There's another, this is interesting stuff. There's another mystic perfection which is known as prakamya magic. By this prakamya power, one can achieve anything he likes. For example, one can make water enter into his eye and then again come out from within the eye simply by his will. He can perform such wonderful activities. The highest perfection of mystic power is called Kamavasayata. This is also magic, but whereas the prakamya power acts to create wonderful effects within the scope of nature, Kamavasayata permits one to contradict nature, in other words, to do the impossible. Of course, one can derive great amounts of temporary happiness by achieving such yogic, materialistic perfections. Foolishly, people, you get tired of it after a while. Let's say if you had some of these powers, reach out and make a deposit, or wouldn't make a deposit, make a withdrawal. So, but you get tired of it. That's the problem with materialistic happiness of any sort. It just gets dry after a while. What do they say? Seen it, been there, done it. You have to have some variety. That's why we have this principle, which we explained yesterday, 2 days ago. Chapala sukha, flickering happiness from anything in this material world. Foolishly, people who are enamored of the glimmer of modern materialistic advancement are thinking that the Krishna consciousness movement is for less intelligent men. I am better off being busy with my material comforts, maintaining a nice apartment, family, and sex life. These people do not know that at any moment they can be kicked out of their material situation. Due to ignorance, they do not know the goal of life, and it is due only to the darkest ignorance that people become enamored of the glimmering advancement of material comforts. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has therefore said that the advancement of material knowledge renders the person more foolish, he says more than an ass, because it causes one to forget his real identity by its glimmer. This is doom for him because this human form of life is meant for getting out of the material contamination. By the advancement of material knowledge, people are becoming more and more entangled in material existence. They have no hope of being liberated from this catastrophe. Of course, their hope is the association of the pure devotee. In the Hari Bhakti Shuddhaya, it is stated that Prahlad Maharaj, a great devotee of the Lord, prayed to Nrsingadeva, the half-man, half-lion incarnation as follows. My dear Lord, I repeatedly pray unto your lotus feet that I may simply be stronger in devotional service. I simply pray that my Krishna consciousness may be more strong and steady because happiness derived out of Krishna consciousness and devotional service is so powerful that with it one can have all the other perfections of religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, and even the attainment of liberation from material existence. Wow. That's a whiffum, if I ever heard one. Does anyone know what a whiffum is? A whiffum means, what's in it for me? It's an acronym for that. What's in it for me? Well, you have all the perfections of religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, and even the attainment of liberation. Wow. And pure devotional service, which is even better. Actually, a pure devotee does not aspire after any of these perfections because the happiness derived from devotional service in Krishna consciousness is so transcendental and so unlimited that no other happiness can compare to it. It is said that even one drop of happiness in Krishna consciousness stands beyond any comparison with an ocean of happiness derived from any other activity. Thus, any person who has developed even a little quantity of pure devotional service can very easily kick out all the other kinds of happiness derived from religiousness. It means mundane religiousness, all these rituals, and genuflect, or whatever you're going to do. Economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. There was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya known as Kolavecha Shudhara, who was a very poor man. He was doing a small business selling cups made from the leaves of plantain trees, and his income was almost nothing. Still, he was spending 50% of his small income on the worship of the Ganges. With the other 50%, he was living somehow. Lord Chaitanya once revealed himself to this confidential devotee, Kalabhecha Sridhar, and offered him any opulence he liked, but Sridhar informed the Lord that he did not want any material opulence. He was quite happy in his present position and wanted only to gain unflinching faith and devotion unto the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. That is the position of pure devotees. If they can be engaged 24 hours each day in devotional service, they do not want anything else, not even the happiness of liberation or becoming one with the Supreme. In fact, there's a story about Kalabhecha Sridhar that he was in so much happiness he would cry in ecstasy all night. And his neighbors were thinking he was crying because he was hungry, because he was a very poor man. But he was actually crying in ecstasy. He was so happy. I would love to cry in ecstasy. That's such a wonderful sentiment. In the Narada Pancharatra, it is also said that any person who has developed even a small amount of devotional service doesn't care a fig for any kind of happiness derived from religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, or the 5 kinds of liberation. Any kind of happiness derived from religiousness, economic development, liberation, or sense gratification cannot even dare to enter into the heart of a pure devotee. It is stated that as the personal attendants and maidservants of a queen, follow the queen with all respect and obeisances. Similarly, the joys of religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation follow the devotional service of the Lord. In other words, a pure devotee does not lack any kind of happiness derived from any source. He does not want anything but service to Krishna. But even if he should have another desire, the Lord fulfills that without the devotees asking. You don't have to ask Krishna. Krishna will give it to you. Okay. So I guess we'll start this. Next section is the rareness of pure devotional service. In the preliminary phase of spiritual life, there are different kinds of austerities, penances, and similar process for attaining self-realization. However, even if an executor of these processes is without any material desire, he can still not achieve devotional service. It's very rare. And aspiring by oneself alone to achieve devotional service is also not very hopeful because Krishna does not agree to award devotional service to merely anyone. Don't worry, it's not hopeless. Krishna can easily offer a person material happiness or even liberation, but he does not agree very easily to award a person engagement in his devotional service. Devotional service can, in fact, be attained only through the mercy of a pure devotee. There's the hope. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Majjhīla 19th chapter, text 151, it is said, by the mercy of the spiritual master who is a pure devotee, and by the mercy of Krishna, one can achieve the platform of devotional service. There is no other way. So let's talk about this for a second. First of all, one achieves devotional service by having bhakti. Like this book is called Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Bhakti means more than just devotion or love. It means, basically, according to that definition I gave in the beginning of this whole book, Bhakti means to serve Krishna without any ulterior purpose, subtle or gross. That's the indirect meaning of bhakti. And the direct meaning, primary meaning, is to do what Krishna wants, be in ecstasy, do it with love, and be active at it. Okay, so that's bhakti. So how do you get that bhakti? Well, we talked before about a bhakti lata bija. We talked about the bij in relationship to karma bij, the desire to do some sinful thing. So there's also a bija, or a seed, in relationship to devotion to Krishna. So how do you get that seed? What store do you go to get that seed from? Well, there's an interesting description. Brahmanda Brahmate Konna Bhagwan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Bhari Bhakti Lata Bij. That there's only one way to get that bija, or that seed of devotion. And that way is not from Krishna. Krishna doesn't give devotion. I mean, he could if he wanted to, but the way he's arranged things is he doesn't give devotion. Now, how do you get devotion? Devotion, bhakti, is independent. completely independent. However, bhakti is present where? In the hearts of pure devotees. Love is present, the devotional love, service, doing what Krishna wants is present in the heart of the devotees. It's actually a shakti, it's an energy. We're talking about a bija or a seed, we're talking about an energy. Ooh, dark energy, or electric energy, or kinetic energy. Anyway, we don't want to get too much into physics here. So, bhakti is like an energy. It's a shakti. Bhakti, shakti. Shakti means there's an energy there. So that bhakti shakti is a person, is independent, and resides in the heart of a devotee. So the only way we can get bhakti is by getting it from a devotee, pleasing a devotee, pleasing a pure devotee, like His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. And then by pleasing him, getting his mercy. Because we talk about mercy. What does mercy mean? Mercy means to get something that you really don't deserve. Maybe you want it. There's a reason for getting it. There is a reason that you're ready for it. But there's not a reason in terms of you've done something to deserve it. That's a difference. You can't say causeless. We talk about causeless mercy. That there's absolutely no cause. Well, one cause is that you're actually ready for it. And therefore, when you're ready for it, Krishna sends you, by the mercy of Krishna, one comes in contact with the pure devotee. And by the mercy of the pure devotee, one gets this bhakti, the bhakti lata bij, the seed, or of the creeper of devotion. Guru Krishna Prasade Bhakti Lata Bij. So that's how one gets it. Ordinarily, it's impossible. But if one comes in contact with someone who has it, that person can give it. And when a person gives it, you have to water that seed. It's not that you just get a seed. You go to the store. For example, we had people here who went to the store and they bought some seeds. And they didn't water them. And they grew. But at the same time, there were other things growing. Weeds. Because they didn't put mulch there. They didn't pick up the weeds or take out the weeds. And so eventually the garden becomes weed garden. So the same thing with your heart. As you're cultivating this bhakti lata bij, the seed, creeper of devotion, by the process of hearing and chanting, then you also have to be very careful of weeds. These are called anarthas, weeds for profit, adoration, distinction. You want to be appreciated as a great devotee. Weeds for economic development. All the things we just talked about that interfere with the happiness that one gets from devotional service. So anyway, this is, even though it's rare, one can get it by the mercy of a pure devotee, such as His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So, on that happy note, and we only covered one paragraph of the rareness of pure devotional service, we will end for today and take some questions. Hold on a second. And I will unmute you. And you can ask questions, please. Okay, who has questions? Questions, comments? No one? I guess everybody. Okay, Sita, you have a question.
Maharaj, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. You mentioned about the when we are in pain, when someone is suffering, is that type of a happiness?
Is what is the
When someone is suffering, and if
when
you are
someone is
feeling,
suffering?
and we are feeling that pain, intense pain, it's just like we
Yeah,
are.
we the pain when we see people suffering because of their attachment in the world, we feel compassion. That's happiness. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
A Vaishnava's compassion may manifest itself as pain in that Vaishnava's heart to see someone suffering. However, that compassion is actually ecstasy. Even though it's pain, it's ecstasy. And, by the mercy of some of my disciples, I get a chance to experience this ecstasy quite a bit. So I have a PhD in that right now. You see something happen to a disciple, and you just, oh my God. I mean, anyway, it's interesting. Like, there's this Christian prayer, you know, the way you pray to God, now I lay me down to sleep and pray the Lord my soul to keep. And if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. I'm sure you've heard that prayer before. So I pray, now that I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my disciples' souls to keep. And if they die before they wake, I pray the Lord Yamaraj won't take. Anyway, so I don't know if you know that prayer. That's actually a Christian prayer. So even though I'm not a Christian, I know that prayer. So the point is, yes, it's a fact. And that's the pure devotee, that's called Paraduka Dukhi, is for himself, he's not interested in his own happiness, but he's interested in the other's happiness, and he's feeling pain on account of other people's pain, on the account of the conditioned soul's pain. And that experience is actually ecstasy, but you can't understand it unless you actually experience it. And it's actually ecstasy because it's a manifestation of love. Just like when a mother, all right, let me give you a practical example. When her mother hears her child crying, she feels some pain in her heart. I assume. I've never been a mother, at least in this lifetime. So she feels, we don't have any mothers. Oh, yeah, we do, Radha Padma. When you heard Krishna Kanta cry, you feel pain in your heart. But it's like a happiness, because it's love. And you're thinking, how can I relieve my dear little daughter's crying? And so that actually is, it's like a happiness that love for a mother has for a child when the child's in difficulty or something like that. The mother would never want to give it up. So someone should mute themselves anyway. So so that's what I meant. That pain that a devotee, an advanced or pure devotee feels out of compassion is actually happiness, even though it appears to be pain. It is actually happiness. So, Krishna's given me a lot of that happiness. Anyway, unfortunately. Anyway, so. Okay, so I won't tell any more jokes about that. So who else has a question for us?
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Oh, Chitraleka, okay.
I receive my obeisances. Thank you for the class. What when that pain expresses like frustration, for example, when I see my loved ones, my family, like suffering, but I try to take them to Krishna consciousness, and they just don't. In my pain transforms into somehow, like a frustration. Like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like it is close to some anger, like, why don't you want this? Why do you want to keep on suffering? Is it still ecstasy?
Well, I don't know if the anger is actually ecstasy, but the frustration can be. The anger, because the anger means we're forgetting Krishna and the philosophy that everybody has their free will. We think we're the controller. Because that's caused by frustration. In that case, anger is caused by frustration. Generally, there may be exceptions. But the frustration, we're trying our best to bring someone to Krishna consciousness. But as soon as we become angry, then we lose, in many cases, our compassion. So the standard as to whether it's still spiritual or not is whether or not we maintain our compassionate attitude. If we become angry at someone, we're not compassionate anymore. We feel like smashing them. I'm going to teach you a lesson. You know, that's that's the end. You know, that's the end of compassion when we get angry. So there's a limit. There's a limit to that. You know, we can feel a little frustrated. I tried so hard. You know, as they say, you can lead a devotee to water, but you can't make them drink. I know it. Same, lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. So, or you could lead a disciple to Krishna, but you can't make them chant. So, there's frustration, but if one gets angry at the person, then it's mundane, material at that point. You rascal, like that. It's mundane. Okay? Okay, yeah, that was an interesting point about how compassion can sometimes bring pain, but the pain is ecstasy out of love. If it gets transformed to hate, anger, anything else other than love as the motivating factor, then it's no longer spiritual. So, who else has a question? Got a lot of people here. Most of who are hiding out and can see their picture. It gets like that after a while, a few meetings. People don't want me to see them sleeping or something during that. I do that in GBC meetings. What I do during GBC meetings, I generally just do this. So it looks like I'm nice. And at the same time, I'm eating my prasadam. So anyway, whoops, did I lose the video? There I am again. So, and also I'm developing a whole means to play a video of myself so they think I'm listening, you know. So I'm going to have like a half-hour video of myself sitting down and nodding like that. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. And so then people think I'm attentive and I could be resting or reading, doing something practical, or playing my guitar. So that's the advantage of Zoom conferences. So who else has an interesting question?
Guru Maharaj, it's me.
Let's see, I'm looking for your square. Oh, Sita, that's you again.
Yes, if no one has a question, I can ask.
Okay. Go ahead.
So will we know when we get the bhakti beach in our heart? How do we know?
Yes, we know. It's an objective. We come across a devotee or take initiation, and we start chanting the holy names, and we have a little taste for chanting them. You know, these are all symptoms of having the bhakti lata bij. Of course, you have to cultivate it so it grows quickly. It depends on the gardener. You know, you can have two people can get the same seed, and one person, the plant could become you know those Japanese bushes? Anyone seen the little Japanese bushes? They're about, you know, full-grown tree about this tall, called the bonsai plants. Has anyone heard those things before? Bonsai plants, yeah. So if we're not so focused, then our devotional service would be like a bonsai plant. And if we actually are focused, someone else getting the seed at the exact same time, his or her devotional service will be like, you ever hear the story Jack and the Beanstalk? No? Oh my God, where do I get all these examples?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yes, so Jack and the Beanstalk. Anyway, it's interesting. I mean, I just thought about it. It's interesting. You know, Jack had this beanstalk. He climbed all the way up and went back to Godhead. I mean, I changed part of the story. Ended up in the spiritual world. So it's up to us how we cultivate the plant. So we cultivate the plant by regular hearing and chanting, and we cultivate it by pulling out the weeds, because the weeds will grow at the same time. I mean, that's what we've experienced in the garden. the weeds grow at the same time. Sometimes they choke off the main plant, and then you lose the main plant, or you can't identify. And sometimes the weeds even look like, if you're not an expert gardener. For example, I'll give you a funny story from our own garden here. Several years ago, we had an expert gardener who planted beautiful flowers in our garden, and very expert. And then some devotee came. He came with a what is that? A weed whacker, it's called, or whatever. Something to cut down the weeds. He thought it was just a weed, and he cut it down. And this expert gardener was so frustrated after that. So sometimes devotees who are not expert in identifying the weed of the creeper of devotion, from the creeper of devotion, they'll actually cut down the creeper of devotion by committing offenses. And then they'll grow the weeds. The weeds of profit, adoration, and distinction, or the weeds, being self-centered. I'm a great devotee. Look at me. I'm a Guru Maharaj. When is my Vyas Puja? I'll write my own Vyas Puja offering. Just like today, I got a note. Where's that note? From one of my many fans. She said, finally. Let me find it. Give me 1 second. She said, by Guru and Krishna's mercy, I'm done with the book. I've given your biography the title, You Have Shown Me the Way. 212 pages of me. Anyway. Now we have to find a cartoonist to illustrate the book. So anyway, so if one starts to get excited when they hear stuff like that, there's a book about me, then that means there's a weed. Because a devotee doesn't like to be glorified. And the other day, but this was several years ago, I was with one of my godbrothers, Lochan Prabhu, and he was testing out his three-dimensional scanner. And he tested it out on me, scanned my head, and then he used his 3D printer and he printed me. So, I don't even know where it is right now, anyway. I didn't put it on my altar. So that's a weed. If I actually, not that the image was a weed, but if we actually become proud of these different things, or thinking ourselves to be great devotees, or how would Krishna push forward the Krishna consciousness movement without me? Then these are weeds. And these occur as one performs devotional service. One has to be very careful to uproot these weeds. Pride, especially pride. Pride is actually one of the main weeds that occurs. Okay, it's time to end. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. And tomorrow we'll continue with the Nectar Devotion. Nectar Devotion, actually, we had some chats here. Who's asking chat? Is there a type of transcendental anger that isn't mundane? Yes, there is. When that anger is not that one is being controlled by that anger, but one uses his intelligence to apply the anger, just like you may use fire to cook something. So, but you don't just use fire to burn everything down. There's a difference. No. Tulsi sent a message. Bad message. It's not my appearance day. My appearance day is later in the month. Later in the month. Not today. Today is just mundane day. It's October 1st. Okay. On that happy note, we're going to end, and we'll see everybody tomorrow evening, same time, same station. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki